Welcome to the Feeling Loudly podcast, a show about the power and magic of emotion, explored through the lens of astrology, divination, and art. I'm your host, Jana. I'm an astrologer, a tarot reader, Akashic Records reader, poet, and witch, and I'm here to help you feel your feels. Hi friends, welcome to Tarot Tuesday. I want to share a couple announcements before I jump into our card of the week. First up, it is my birthday week and I want to run a little birthday sale. So I pulled a tarot card to get guidance on what the percentage off should be, and I got the star, which is number 17 of the major arcana. So you can take 17% off any live reading with me, astrology readings, Akashic Records readings, tarot readings, using code BDAY17, BDAY 17. I'm going to be running that sale for the first week of May. So you can book anytime by May 7th and use that code to take 17% off a reading. You don't have to book the reading by the 7th, but the reading, how do I phrase this? It needs to be booked by the 7th, but you can book it for any date in the next 60 days. So that is the code. I'll also drop it in the show notes below, along with a link to my Acuity page where you can find all of my services. The other thing is I may be a little bit off schedule for the next week because I'm taking some time off to celebrate, and I don't know. We'll see. I'm still going to do my first AMA episode, and I have some questions that y'all have sent in, which is exciting. If you want your question to be included in that episode, you can submit a question via the little button on my episode page in Spotify. So there's like a little ask a question, and you'll see a prompt to submit a question for our next AMA episode. So you can submit it there. If you're interested, you can share anything like astrology questions, records questions, tarot questions, general spirituality stuff. You can ask a question about me. Just don't make it super personal because I won't answer those. But if you're looking for my take on something, if you have more of like a personal life question, you're welcome to ask those too. I will pull a tarot card for each of the questions unless the tarot is like super irrelevant to the question. So kind of a cool opportunity to get like a little answer and a little single card pull. That is always available. So on any episode, you can check the Spotify episode page and you'll see the little submit an AMA question. What else? I mentioned on my last episode, and I'll mention again, I super appreciate your reviews and your ratings. I've had some trolls who are giving me bad ratings that are not real, so it's extra appreciated right now. If you enjoy this podcast and would like to support it, it's a really great way to show me some love and support me as a creator. And finally, if you want to show a little extra love, you can always become a patron starting at $6 a month. I'm going to be dropping a slightly belated Taurus season prediction video on Patreon. And at higher tiers, you also gain access to a lot of other cool benefits, but at the lowest tier, you get access to our monthly seasonal Akasha scopes, which feature predictions and pick a card readings for each season. And I also share a pick a card reading for every month separate from that. And in addition to that, I have my little weekly private podcast episodes that I drop in Patreon. And that's all for just $6 a month. And you get 10% off readings with me always. And then at the higher tiers, you get even more benefits. So all of those links are down below if you are interested. But let's get into our episode for the day. Our card for the day, our card for the week is the Four of Swords. So as a refresher, if you don't know this, the swords in the tarot are connected to the element of air. And this card specifically, the Four of Swords, is connected to the sign of Libra, which is a cardinal air sign. And it's also connected to Jupiter, the planet Jupiter. So Jupiter in Libra is what gives us the Four of Swords. And in this deck, in the Lilith Tarot, we see a figure who is kneeled, and they're sort of in like, their hands are on the ground in front of their knees. They have this sort of solemn feeling to them, and they're contained within four swords that are creating a border around them, keeping them enclosed. And within that enclosed sort of box that they're sitting in, there's a snake. And there's also a little moon symbol that is by their forehead. And the snake doesn't appear to be hostile at all. It's just sort of like curled up by the person's back. And then above on the like top sword, there's what looks like maybe a crow or a raven that's sitting up there kind of looking down at this figure. And then there's a slightly stormy looking background that's going on here with some rain clouds above. And the feeling is a little bit tense, but focused and quiet. And that's really apt for the Four of Swords, which is a card that comes after the Three of Swords, which is the first Tarot Tuesday episode that we did. And that was, I actually just re-listened to that episode this week because someone asked me about it, and it prompted me to go check it out again. And if you haven't listened to that one, it might be worth listening to kind of prepare for this episode. We'll see. But in essence, the Four of Swords coming after the Three of Swords, which is a card of pain and often some type of trauma that we might experience, or if not a trauma, a loss, an experience in life that is not easy. Like it comes with pain, it comes with grief often. Often it's a feeling of betrayal or some type of suffering. And the Four of Swords is the time that we have to take after that experience in order to heal. And so often the Four of Swords is connected to contemplation and solitude and restoration. I kind of think of it as like going to a silent retreat after going through a divorce, or taking time away to go to the beach after you go through a breakup or job loss or someone you love dies. And you need to just go and kind of immerse yourself in an experience that helps you to allow the emotions to flow. But also there's sort of an element of like presence with the mind, like mindfulness practices that help us stay with what is and to allow the thoughts to just drift on by like clouds in the sky, and to be present with whatever it is that's coming up within us, acknowledging the weather, but not getting so absorbed in it that we internalize everything that's going on around us as our inner experience. And so that's a really common mindfulness practice, is like acknowledging the sounds you're hearing, acknowledging the thoughts that come up without getting absorbed into them, just kind of like making space for reality to be reality. And that can be something that's really healing for us after difficult experiences, because it helps us make space for our whole kind of spectrum of human emotion, and to not get overly attached to anything can also be a sort of healing journey, especially if we've experienced loss, and especially if we're facing a lot of unknowns and just have no clue what's next on our journey, which is often the case after a Three of Swords experience, which can be really jolting. And so the Four of Swords is not like always or even usually an experience that's easy, just as meditation is not an experience that's easy. It's something that is healing and can be healing and really valuable for us, but it's not necessarily easy. And it's because life isn't easy. And a Four of Swords experience, just like meditation, is something that tries to make space for life as it is, as opposed to tweaking it and projecting upon it and kind of like molding it into what we want it to be. Four of Swords to me is more about acceptance. And when we can move toward acceptance, that's often also how we move toward joy and how we move toward peace, if not joy, or contentment, or at least just presence. And Four of Swords also can be about rest. And I think about how our nervous systems get so taxed when we go through really tumultuous periods of life, and when we go through pain or loss or heartbreak, it can really impact our nervous system to the point that we might feel like hyperstimulated, or we might feel exhausted. Like there's this whole emotional exhaustion that we go through that is very physical in nature too. And something I felt recently that kind of like brought me back into this experience is that I was experiencing some heartache, and I noticed my chest actually aching. Like this feeling of emotional weight was so strong that I felt like a deep ache in my chest, and I felt like my throat feeling closed up and tense because there were tears that were wanting to come out. And it was just this feeling of heaviness in my chest. And I remember like sitting with it and being like, wow, I'm experiencing a lot of pain right now, but like it's pretty cool that I can actually feel this physically, and that my body is like acknowledging this emotion as so real. Because we live in a culture for many of us that doesn't value emotions to the same degree as, or I should say, like doesn't see heartbreak or doesn't see grief as real as a physical injury, or as real as a sort of like somatic experience or illness that is more physical. But it is physical, right? Like our bodies are the channel for everything. And so the Four of Swords is a card that can help us acknowledge that and make space for the fact that we need to rest. We need to physically rest in order to emotionally heal, and in order to mentally heal after heartache of any kind. And so our oracle card that's coming out to clarify this from the Prism Oracle is happiness. And I really liked that. It's not what I was expecting, but I really liked that happiness came out, because I think kind of going back to the message about how presence can help us access joy and how acceptance can help us access joy, that feels like a sort of tee up to this oracle card. So I'll read to you from the guidebook, which says, happiness is one of the most beautiful feelings, as if the world is shimmering around you. But we seldom acknowledge when we're feeling good, and instead focus on when we're feeling bad. So take this time to cherish your happiness, really experience it, and feel its warmth. And so the warmth of happiness can be a sort of blanket that we carry with us, and that we can put on in moments when we are experiencing grief and sadness. And it reminds me of an oracle card that I got the other day. I think it was for my week ahead spread. For my personal spread, I got this oracle card that was about how in seasons where we experience harvest and see sort of the payoff for our hard work, it's also a time to keep in the back of our minds that we will face another winter in the future. And so it's a time to kind of like do the groundwork and prepare and to restore and to heal and to rest, knowing that we will eventually face another winter, and that the seasons are kind of relentless in that way, and that they just keep coming. Like we don't pause and have an eternal summer or an eternal spring. We will eventually face the death cycle and the period where things are more sparse and we have to be more frugal. And there's this necessity to keep that in the back of our minds as we're experiencing like joy and abundance, and to allow ourselves to be present with that and really like soak it up. Like I find sometimes when I'm feeling joyful that I might not let myself feel the like full expansiveness of that joy, because there's just something a little bit scary about it maybe, or maybe like, I don't know, a narrative that stops me from opening up to that like full experience of it. And it's something I'd like to stop doing and to like really open up and like really make space to be present with the joy. Because when the grief comes up and when the loss happens and when the aches occur, it's like not experiencing that joy didn't do anything to help me in those moments where sadness comes around later. If anything, being able to be present with the fullness of that emotion also makes it easier for me to be present with the fullness of more difficult emotions. And so there's something here when it comes to the Four of Swords about how in these moments when we might be in pain or when we might be healing, reflecting back on the periods that were also joyful and beautiful doesn't have to be so painful. It can just be an act of recognition and sort of like an act of truth. Like I think about how when I've gone through breakups in the past, there was a part of me at times that wanted to see the relationship as like totally terrible, or to see that person as like totally terrible, and to go into that sort of black and white thinking because that seemed to maybe like quell the grief and make it easier for me to move on and put it behind me. But in reality, it didn't, because then what happened is the like more rose-colored glasses perception of the relationship that painted it out to be wonderful and that painted out that person to just be like, great, would swing back around and sort of counter that alternate perspective I'd had and cause a lot of emotional confusion. And so that's been an experience I've had after pretty much every breakup, where it's like I first try to go into like the anger place and sort of like black and white thinking and they're terrible, they suck, whatever. And then I swing into the like, well, I'm having this memory. Oh, that was really great. Oh, I really love that about them. Oh, remember that sweet thing that they would do. And that would sort of counteract the other feelings or the other memories and cause me to waffle and feel like maybe I was missing out on something great, when in fact it usually always was not right for me. The relationship was not right for me. And so that sort of like oscillating, swinging back and forth experience was a little bit complicated. And then eventually I would usually reach more of like a middle ground. But I think what the Four of Swords is beckoning us toward this week and in this moment is to make space for the wholeness of it all and to allow ourselves to feel all of it and recognize that by feeling all of it, we also make space for true joy and happiness. And it's in these moments of grief, on the other hand, when we allow ourselves to feel the fullness of that, that we kind of like increase our emotional threshold and we become better and better at experiencing more feelings, which like I maybe is not something that everyone on this planet wants to do, but you know, you're listening to a podcast called Feeling Loudly, and I really see experiencing the fullness of emotions as like the recipe for a fulfilling life. And I think it does make way for happiness. When we can grieve, when we can be with the pain, it's sort of like we allow that to flush out of our systems, and then we have more emotional space for all the other stuff, for all the beauty, the joy, the abundance, the love, the presence with pleasure and with delight. And being present with all of it to the best of our ability is the way to create a more joyful life. And so I want to move over to our little song of the day, which is making a lot more sense now after having recorded this. So our song of the day is Summer Love by Black Party. And I will read you the lyrics, which are pretty short. So it starts off, seating room clouds puffing on loud, we won't come down for later on. Watching the world spinning around, bring you closer like tides to the moon. Take a walk around the beach, put your feet in the sand. Don't you be scared, I'll hold your hand. Nothing can describe the feeling I feel when I'm with you. Forevermore, I'll never forget you. Baby, you can be my summer love. Want to vibe with you, want to get high with you. Get in the car and drive with you. Baby, you can be my summer love. Baby, can you be my summer love? So, it's a sweet song, and I'm kind of drawn to just this idea of like being at the beach and putting your feet in the sand, telling a lover to not be scared. I'll hold your hand. Nothing can describe the feeling that I feel when I'm with you. Forevermore, I'll never forget you. So I don't know, it's like, it's sweet, but there's also a sort of sadness that I feel from this song, and maybe I'm just kind of projecting that onto it. But there's this feeling of like presence with it, but also almost reflection. Like you're already in this future moment, kind of expecting that you might lose the person that you're with, but that time, this summer love, can be preserved as this beautiful memory that won't go away. And the feeling that I feel when I'm with you, nothing can describe it. Forevermore, I'll never forget you. Don't be scared. Put your feet in the sand. Take a walk around the beach. For some reason, I'm going backwards right now in the lines. But it feels like there's the sweetness of the moment, the presence of the moment, being with someone who you care about, who you feel deeply with when you're around them, and knowing that you'll never forget that person and that they will be kind of preserved in this moment of time as this beautiful memory that you can come back to. And maybe that memory eventually becomes kind of a sad one because it's reflective and that relationship ends, or maybe not. Maybe it continues on, and that becomes kind of this little milestone moment that you can reflect back on and kind of capture the energy of that piece of the relationship. But the idea of summer love is like impermanent, right? Like, baby, can you be my summer love? They're not saying, can you be like my lifelong love, just my summer love. And so there's an inherent brevity to it. And when we think about like flings, or we think about brief love affairs, or even just brief experiences, depending on your relationship to brevity and your relationship to impermanence, that might bring up a whole spread of emotions. I know for me, it's a hard one. Like, I'm a very fixed person, and especially when it comes to relationships, it can be hard for me to accept endings if it's someone that I really, really love. And it can be hard for me to accept that sometimes the story is just a short one. Sometimes it's just something that happens and it's beautiful and it can be life-changing, and then it ends. And you reflect back on that period and it becomes a sort of time capsule for this personal transformation and for this transformation through love. And those relationships and those experiences that really punctuate our life and that cause us to feel a sense of awe sometimes do just last for a season. Something my mom used to always say to me, and that is like a very common phrase, but I thought it was like just my mom's wisdom growing up, was something like, people enter your life for a reason, a season, or a lifetime. And she used to say that to me a lot when I was growing up and when I was experiencing my little breakups and my big breakups. Like, people come along for a reason, a season, or a lifetime. And I always wanted it to be a lifetime. Like, when I was experiencing these losses, I was like, but why? Like, why not a lifetime? Why does it have to be a season? Why does it have to be a reason? And I think there's crossover, right? Like, of course, I think pretty much everyone comes into our life for a reason. But in the case of these moments where I was usually in pain, I was usually grieving someone, grieving a relationship, it helped me sort of conceptualize that it wasn't just for nothing. Like, an ending was not just for nothing. It taught me something, or it just accompanied me for a very specific chapter of my life, and then it wasn't meant to come with me. They weren't meant to come with me. And that has gotten easier and easier as I've aged, and I've gotten more comfortable with impermanence and with non-attachment. It's still hard. I'm very Plutonian, and yet, like, I think there is a lot of beauty in that phrase, and I think that really captures the sort of Four of Swords experience, where often someone has gone or something has gone, and we're left to contemplate it, and we're left with our memories, and to sort of sit in presence with the depth of the feelings that it brings up within us, to know that we don't know, that we don't know what's next, that we don't know if that person will come back and be in our lives for a lifetime, or if they were just a sort of like seasonal flower or someone who was there to help us learn a very specific lesson. And that unknown can be painful, and it can be liberating in a way. It can be, I say, like, kind of with like my lip curled, I guess. I think it can be liberating. I like hypothesize that it can be liberating. I'm still kind of working on that myself and trying to get to the place where I can surrender to the unknown when it comes to especially relationship outcomes and just situations that feel so big and so nebulous that it's hard for us to grab hold of anything. I'm going through Neptune conjunct my natal Venus, which is a once in a lifetime transit. And it's teaching me surrender. It's teaching me to get present with the sort of like murkiness of what I don't know, especially when it comes to all Venusian things. So love, connection, money, my values, which seem to be shifting in a very confusing way, and just like what I value in general. And what I'm attracted to. I've noticed that over the course of like the last 6 months or so, it really kicked off when I started watching Outlander in the winter. I was like, God damn, I am so fucking attracted to Jamie, the lead in Outlander. And of course, like, I think most people are who watch that show religiously. But he sort of embodies this like really like traditionally masculine energy, is like a fighter and a warrior and like really courageous and brave and like really fucking hot and just like will do whatever to protect Claire. And it's really like feeding into this very kind of traditional like masculine role. But I think it's beautifully done, and I love the show, and I recommend it, and I obsessed over it and watched it all the way through, like the first, whatever it was, 6 or 7 seasons in a span of weeks in the dead of winter when we were snowed in. And I was like, well, here we go. I'm going to just nosedive into this experience. And I noticed myself just really shifting in the types of people that I was attracted to. And I used to date like a lot of artsy guys, and I mean, it was kind of a mixed bag. I like skater boys, artists, like kind of, I don't know. Then I dated like a union organizer who wasn't either of those things. Yeah, it's been a mixed bag, but like I really suddenly was like, wow, I'm not really attracted to like any of the people that I've dated before. And I think that my taste is shifting. And then I started noticing people showing up in my 3D reality that matched this new evolving taste. And so that's something that's interesting. And I'm trying to figure out how it ties into the Four of Swords, but it must somehow if it's coming up in my brain. I guess the fact that like after experiences of change, in my case, a Neptunian change, a Venusian change, there's this sort of introspection, contemplation. We go inward and we take the space to kind of be by ourselves and to ask questions. Like the Four of Swords is a going inward experience. And the song, coming back to the song too, like the brevity of that experience, dating or being with one person can really shift your idea of what you want and your idea of what you don't want. And I've experienced that in pretty much every relationship I've gone through, where I've been like, oh, that's great. Ooh, I really like that. Oh, I've never seen that before. Or like, oh, I don't fuck with that at all. Like there are these experiences where it's like we really don't know until we know. And we start having these aha moments that come through just experiencing life. And then sometimes, again, we might lose those people. We might lose those relationships. We might choose to end those relationships and walk away. And it's through the experience of like having lived and often having lost that we learn more about ourselves. And then we can carry that wisdom forward and make choices that help us get more truly to ourselves each step that we take. And it's this like little unfolding learning journey of introspection and self-discovery that happens through relating and through endings. And sometimes through continuations also, but often through endings where we can reflect on the experience that we've gone through and make choices that help us get closer to our happiness. Okay, it's all making sense. I love it when it kind of synthesizes and then it all makes sense. So the brevity of experiences, especially in love, help us get closer to ourselves. And although they often come with ache and grief and pain, it's like a little nugget of truth that we discover too, or maybe a big nugget of truth that we discover about ourselves in that experience that helps us kind of map our way to our joy and to the experiences that we want in our future. And when we have that self-insight and we have that knowledge, that very Four of Swords-esque self-knowledge and wisdom, we can move forward with more clarity and make choices that help us align with what is right for us. Okay, that is all. Thank you for listening. And again, if you're interested in any of the stuff I mentioned at the top of the episode, you can scroll down to the show notes. If you want to take advantage of my birthday discount, again, that'll be active through May 7th. So just for this first week of May, and you can book anytime in the next 60 days. And the other stuff I mentioned, Patreon. If you want to get on my newsletter, that's cool too. I will be sending out a new moon newsletter on May 7th, and those newsletters are always kind of fun and feature extra goodies and stuff. And I am back on social, back on Threads, and back on Instagram more fully. And you can find me at Feeling Loudly on those platforms and on YouTube and on TikTok. All right, y'all. I love you, and I will talk to you on Friday.